some of my classes that I teach out in the community. And so one of the things I do, many things, but one of them is actually teaching parenting classes. And so, so I teach on a variety of topics, and I gave the group a menu and they selected some of my topics. And this one today is on managing emotions. And so without further ado, we'll jump into that topic. Let's see, and I don't know if I can, I may be able to monitor some chat if people would like to put in questions or thoughts that you have as we go. Feel free to do that. Maybe I'll ask Kirsten.
Yeah, I have the chat opened as well.
Okay, perfect. So I'll ask her to monitor that for us. And but what we're going to talk about today, I'm just going to kind of walk you through, like, what are emotions? What are they like for a child? And then I want to talk about temperament, because temperament is a lot of what creates those frustrating and difficult to manage emotions. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about temperament, and I may ask for a couple volunteers, if you don't mind, to help me work through that so people can understand how that kind of works. And then I'll give you some different scenarios that parents, for those of you with especially younger children, or some, I try to have a range of scenarios, but that may seem familiar to you as far as things you've dealt with your own children at home, and some strategies for addressing those. So we'll go ahead and get started with what are emotions. So let's just start with that. We'll go to the next slide. And something that I like to highlight when we talk about emotions are that they have three different parts that hopefully we'll see in a minute here. May have to, oh, there we go. Okay, sorry, but the animation's just a little slow. Okay, so emotions are reactions to our human experience. So just being human, we're going to have emotions. Their response, this one is important. So their response to either internal stimuli, so they might be, we think of something that makes us sad. Maybe it's somebody that we've lost, or, something, an experience that we've had that makes us sad. So they can be thoughts that just cross our mind, and they create an experience of an emotion in us, or they can come from external stimuli. So things that happen to us, situations in our lives or events every day. When your boss tells you, they're disappointed in the way you completed your task, or your partner tells you, you forgot to take out the trash, or, whatever those things. We have emotions in response to both the things that just go through our brains every day, and then also the events and situations that we experience. So same with kids. The tricky thing is with our kids is that we obviously we can't get in their brains. So we can have a sense of like why they started crying when they got hit by the toy that their brother threw at them. Like, that makes sense. Like, they got hurt and they're crying, and so they're hurt, so they're crying. But we don't always understand when, like, crying comes out of nowhere and we don't understand what's going on, and they can't really tell us. So that can be really frustrating. But that's an example of the thought or an experience that they've had that is triggering that emotion, but we can't see that cause and effect happening. So it's tricky. Okay, go ahead. And the next thing to note about emotions is that they're not good or bad. And this is important for adults as well as children. But I always like to remind people, a lot of times we think of like anger and sadness and frustration as bad emotions, and like happiness and joy, excitement as positive emotions or good emotions. And so it's important when you're talking to kids about emotions that we don't label them as good or bad, that we think about them as signals to interpret. So we're having those emotions, we're having a reaction in our body, mentally and physically in our body, because of something that's going on, whether it's internal or external. We have to figure out why we're having that. Okay, next. And then, as I was starting to say, they're complex and they have three parts. So we'll talk about that right now. All right, so if we look at these three key parts of an emotion, we have our first thing is our subjective experience. So it's either that thought or memory that happened, an exciting thing. So we have examples here like graduation, getting married, having an exciting business deal that happened, getting your first job, having a baby, all those things, they create both, they create a lot of different kinds of emotions for us, right? We might be both excited, scared, about like when we had our first child, right? It's like, it's exciting, but we're also scared. Like, how in the world am I going to do this? I've never done this before. We have a physiological response. So our body has a reaction, and that creates a lot of times some sort of energy or feeling, right, inside of our body that we can experience. So I'm explaining this because this is what's going on in your kids' bodies as well, as they're having these experiences of emotions. So a lot of times when they have those physiological responses, that energy that is built up in them has to go somewhere. So it gets released sometimes with crying, with yelling, with throwing things. A lot of times they just don't have the social skills or the ability to manage those emotions. And so we see behavioral responses that are like probably what a lot of adults would do if they didn't have that, like that filter, that sensor that says like, I shouldn't say this to this person, I shouldn't do this to this person, or to my computer. People that get very angry at their computer. We know better. We know that there are consequences. Like if I throw my computer because I'm mad at it, I'm going to break the computer. So, but kids, they don't always have that understanding of consequences, which is why we see them do things in reaction to their emotions that a lot of times they seem like, why did you just do that? You just broke your toy. Well, because they just didn't know how to manage that, what was going on in their body. So in a way, it's like the energy and the feelings and the everything that they're experiencing in their body is more than they can handle with their little their brains that aren't fully developed and able to manage and process all the emotions. Okay, next. All right, so another interesting thing to think about is that emotions, feelings, and moods aren't the same. So you can keep going. So emotions are short-lived but intense, and they have a cause. Usually, again, it's external or internal. For example, there's anger at having to share toys with a sibling. I don't want to share, so I'm angry just in that moment. Feelings are influenced by our perception of the situation, our past experience. So my feeling is, it's not fair that I always have to share with my brother. Why do I always have to do that? So the feeling that I'm having is maybe frustration. Because the sibling doesn't ever ask to get to share. I always have to share, but they never get asked to share. So there's a feeling of there's a feeling of fairness, lack of fairness, that's creating frustration on my part. So just kind of keep that in mind. And then moods are part of temperament, which we'll talk about in a little bit. All right, so I have a question for you guys. Go ahead and write in the chat box what sets your child or your kids off, and think about each of your children if you have more than one, because a lot of times almost all the time our kids are different. They're very different from each other. So if you have multiple kids, you've figured that out. If you don't yet, you've probably seen even kids from the same family that are like, whoa, how did you, or maybe you and your siblings, completely different. Okay, so let's see what we have here. So I'm going to find the chat so that I can see what's happening.
Do you want me to read them, Lisa, or do you want
Oh,
to?
I just found it. Okay. All right. So not continuing to argue for fun. All right. And not getting their way. That's a big one. Okay. Does anybody else have some things that kind of tend to set their kids off? Make them real frustrated. Okay. Lack of preparation or change. Okay. Yeah, we'll talk about that. Okay. Oops, these are going too fast. Okay, sharing, not being understood, can't understand what they're saying. Okay, yes, that can be really frustrating. Then the fight happens. Okay. And then routine change. Yes, and competitive nature, absolutely. Getting told no, yes. Being interrupted. Oh, you guys, these are good. These are so good. Okay. All right. Okay. And we're going to come back to what some of the themes are with all of these in a second. Okay, let's keep going, Kirsten. All right, so a lot of times as parents, we think these kinds of things. Our kids are just doing it to get our attention, so they're throwing a fit to get our attention. They're trying to manipulate you or they know what buttons to push. What do you guys think about this? Do you think this is the case? Or do you think there are times when they're real? Sometimes, but not always. Yeah. I agree with that. Okay. So sometimes kids really do figure out, like, I'm going to have big tears and I'm going to cry because I know that when I cry, mom gives in and lets me have my candy or my or extra screen time, or lets me stay up 15 minutes later when I cry before bed. Okay, so that's like, could be some manipulation going on there. Sometimes if we're not giving them enough attention, they really might be giving, getting angry, throwing a fit, acting out for attention. So that's why I always advise parents to make sure you're giving them a lot of positive attention for the positive behavior so that they're not going to do that kind of acting out. And then, do they know what buttons to push? Yes, some kids really do figure this out, and they like to see that reaction in mom or dad. That for whatever reason is entertaining to some children. And so by not allowing them to see that reaction from you, by staying calm, they're not going to get that satisfaction. And yeah, absolutely struggling with emotional regulation because their brain is not all the way developed. So their prefrontal cortex is what helps them process information, understand consequences, in decision making and problem solving, all those things. It is not developed all the way yet, which means that they're going to struggle. They're not going to have all the skills and the abilities to manage all of these things. Okay, let's keep going. All right, so my next question for you guys is, do you think that emotional challenges are random, or do you think they can be predicted based on your experience with your kids? Predictable, okay. And what do you think makes them predictable? Okay, so daughter's random, son is predictable, okay. That just goes to show differences in kids, right? Anybody have an example of a predictable thing? Okay. Learned a lot about triggers and learning what causes anxiety. Okay. Okay. All right. Well, so when we think about emotional challenges, sometimes they are random. So let's think about this. Um, like something happens out of the blue that they've never dealt with. Um, okay, or deviating from plans or not letting him do things. Okay, yeah, laughing at something funny that my son doesn't like. Okay. Um, okay, so definitely there are things that can be very predictable. So those things that you guys, some of those things that you talked about that sets your kids off, being told no, that's very predictable. Like, as soon as you have to tell your child they can't have something or do something right when they want it, they're gonna have a fit. They're gonna throw a fit. Other things, yeah, changing schedules for some kids, that can be a big thing that sets them off. Um, yeah, and that's a good point. You often attempt to discover the circumstances preceding the emotional outburst. Yeah, so we're always trying to understand. If we can understand what those triggers are, we can be better at preventive, what I call preventive teaching. So it's basically preparing your child to deal with that change or deal with what's about to happen. You give them the, like, okay, in 5 minutes, you're gonna, you kind of give them those warnings so they know that, and they have, okay, 2 minutes, okay, 1 minute. Some kids need that because they need that help with transitioning from one thing to another. So yeah, exactly. So signaling a transition. So it's really important that you understand what their triggers are so that you can better predict them. Now, what happens if we can't predict them? Then they're random and we're just kind of in the moment trying to do the best we can with dealing with them. Okay, let's go to the next one. Next slide. All right, so what happens is, as I talked about, the issue with the brain development, so a lot of times, and just not experiencing life, right? Not having experience in life so that I truly understand how to deal with these situations. But a lot of times, these strong emotions and challenging behaviors, they come from lacking skills. And these skills are flexibility. So that's like our changing schedules. You guys mentioned that. Adaptability, changing plans. We have to do something different than we've always done it. Tolerance. So am I able to deal with somebody saying things to me or doing things to me that I don't like? Or am I going to just, do I kind of just instantly flip a switch? Or am I able to kind of deal with things for a longer time? And then problem solving. So when we don't when we don't have those skills, when kids don't have those skills, that's a lot of times when we see that acting out, that lashing out, or the really strong reactions that they have with like screaming, crying, throwing things, or if it's a teenager, that sort of like slamming doors and saying like hateful things. I hate you. I don't want to talk to you ever again. Those kinds of things are all kind of coming from just the lack of ability to understand and deal with what's going on in their brain. Okay, next slide. Okay, is resilience one? So resilience is a little bit complex because it actually encompasses a lot of these things. So I would say a resilience is sort of an overarching construct that a lot of things we're just talking about are aspects of resilience. So that's kind of how I would describe that. Excuse me. Yeah, okay, so there are a lot of good tools you can use out there, like books. Maren just mentioned the Spot Feelings books, a little bit of flexibility a lot. So helping kids understand what it looks like to be flexible and to understand how it works. Okay, so our common triggers, what do they all have in common? Let's think about this for a second. All right, so doing what someone asks, especially when they ask. So I asked you to turn the TV off, or I asked you to put your video game down right now. Okay, next one. Interacting with others who have their own agendas. So I'm playing with a friend, a peer at school, and they're like, "This is how you play the game." No, this is how you play the game, and we can decide on how to play the game. And so I'm like, "Fine, I'm not playing with you anymore," and I walk away. And I'm not good at playing. Handling a disagreement, same kind of thing. I can't deal with the fact that this person can't agree, and I don't know how to compromise. I don't know that skill yet. Okay, next. Difficult tasks. So I've seen kids do this. So they're trying to do something they can't quite do, and they get super frustrated about it. So they're like, they're trying to tie their shoes, and they can't tie their shoes yet. It's just not something they've mastered. But they don't give up, and they keep trying, and they get real angry about it. And finally, at some point, they maybe just take their shoe off and throw it because they're like, I can't do this. I give up, and that's how I'm going to handle it. Okay. Dealing with a change in plan. So you guys mentioned that a number of your kids are triggered by this one. So scheduling, we said we were going to do this and now we're doing this, things like that. So dealing with a change in plan it's a very common trigger for a lot of kids. Okay. So what do all these things have in common? What do you guys think? Go ahead and type it in the chat. What are your thoughts? What do these have in common? Anybody have ideas? Okay, skills
in the chat.
Yeah, sorry, my thing wasn't moving. Okay.
No, you're okay.
All right, they're surprising foreign. Yes. Control. Yes. Not having control, definitely. New situation, skills and experience. They feel like they aren't in control. They have no say. And new things. Yeah. Okay. They have no control. That's a big one, guys. That's a really good thought, right? Like no one likes to not feel like they have control over what's going on in their like to them in any particular moment. Like adults are the same. We don't like being told what to do. Like you need to do this right now. Nobody likes that. Nobody likes being told that. Even if they know it's good for them, they still don't like it. Okay, so kids are the same, right? They don't like that feeling of like, I don't get to decide. Um, okay, and then with teenagers, lack of trust. So could definitely be that, right? That can be difficult. Okay, let's keep going. All right, so here's where I'm going to tie this into aspects of temperament. Okay. And temperament is something that it's like a lot of times we might have heard the term, but we don't necessarily understand all the aspects of temperament. So I want to lay this out for you guys. And then I'm going to ask somebody to volunteer and I'm going to have them tell me about their child in each of these aspects of temperament. So I'm going to talk about each one real briefly. The first is activity level. All right, so what I want you to do is, and I should have a slide that shows this, but what I need to have is a slide that goes from like 1, so completely inactive, very calm, okay, to 10, extremely active, like has trouble sitting still, is just constantly moving, fidgeting, and can't sit still, okay? Now, the important thing to remember about this is that adults have temperaments too. Everybody does. Our temperament is what underlies our personality. So they are basically our inborn traits or characteristics. So these are not things that can be changed. So I just want people to know they can be managed, but they can't be changed. This is who we are at the core of the very most core of who we are. That's how I like to describe our temperament. So with activity level, you can envision a range from 1 to 10. Biological rhythms. Some people are very scheduled and structured in terms of like when they eat, when they sleep, when they go to the bathroom. And when they do not stay on this regular schedule, they're all out of whack and they're going to have issues. They're going to have, you've seen it, I'm sure, in your kids. A lot of times they didn't eat lunch on time and now they're a mess. They're having breakdown. They're crying. They didn't sleep enough. They stayed at grandma and grandpa's house and now they let them stay up. They got off their schedule and now they're having a meltdown and it's going to be that way all day. Okay, so biological rhythms being very regular. So if I have on a 10, it's like I'm a child that needs to stay on the same schedule all the time or it messes me up. On the other side, I'm very flexible in terms of my schedule and I'm okay no matter what kind of happens to me. I can go with the flow and nothing bad seems to happen. I'm just pretty easygoing in that way. Sensitivity. So I like to think about this one as like if a child is like pushing, like tapping another child, like how long can you sit there and let a person poke or tap you before you're like, okay, stop, that's enough. So it's kind of like thinking about like some kids, it's like they barely touched and they're like, stop it, don't touch me, okay? So sensitivity, they're very high on sensitivity if they're like that. Other kids, it's like, nah, I mean, you can just keep doing something to them and they're like, ah, that's fine, doesn't bother me. So they'd be very low on sensitivity. Intensity of reaction. So this one I like to describe as our drama queens and kings, okay? So these are the kids who have a big reaction no matter what happens. Okay, so whatever it is, it's like, I can't believe that. I can't believe you did that to me. This is the worst day of my life. Okay, so big reaction over something small, that would be intensity of reaction. So very high levels of reaction are going to be like a 10 on that one. And then when we get to adaptability, so a 10 on adaptability, I am very easygoing. I can go with the flow, things change, and I'm fine with it. Versus you said we were going to go to the park, and you said we were going to get ice cream, and you said this was going to happen, and none of those things are happening, and now you're the worst. You're the worst parent. Okay, so just not being able to deal with changes very well. Being very disappointed, highly upset, that's going to be your low on adaptability. The next one is approach withdrawal. So some of you mentioned trying new things or being in new groups of people. That's connected to this aspect of our temperament. So approach withdrawal, if I'm very high on this one, so a 10 on this is like, I can go talk to strangers. I like to eat new foods. I like to go new places. I like to try new things in general. So I am high on what's called approach. So I'm great with new things. So if you imagine the opposite of that is, I don't like to try new things. I don't like new places. I don't like to talk to new people. And so that would be your extremes there, as a 0 to a 10 on that one. Persistence. Am I able to sit there and do the same activity for a very long period of time? If I'm very high on persistence, so like a 10, that would be like, yes, that's the child who can sit there and read a book by themselves for like 2 hours and be great, or play with the same toy for a very long time. Whereas other kids that are like, I'm bored, and they need to move on and do something different every like 5 minutes. So they're the ones that kind of constantly need to be given new things to do. So it's also about giving up easily. So this is high on persistence is less likely to give up, right? I have that grit. Low on persistence is going to be, I easily give up when I can't do something. I'm like, nope, that's too hard. I give up. I'm frustrated. I can't stand frustration. I can't deal with that. Therefore, I'm going to stop doing this thing that's making me frustrated. Okay, so that's going to be low on persistence. Distractibility. This one is going to be kind of what it sounds like, right? If you're very high on distractibility, I like to think of it as like, squirrel, squirrel, squirrel. There's squirrels everywhere, right? So we're trying to read, or imagine that same child trying to read a book, but there's like all kinds of things happening, and then there's this and there's that, and there's just in their environment all these things, and it's very difficult for them to focus. So high on distractibility obviously is going to be having a difficult time focusing, whereas that 0 on distractibility is very good at focusing. Okay. Mood. So mood goes from sort of a positive to a negative. So this is something that a lot of times people don't think about, that we're born with kind of positive tendencies or potentially negative tendencies. So kind of our Eeyores, those are our those negative tendencies. And our positives are kind of like our, I'm happy all the time. I'm always in a good mood. And you can tell this from like when people are, like babies, right? So some babies are so happy. They hardly ever cry. They're just always seem like they're laughing and smiling. Okay. And so that's basically kind of like their mood, or they just kind of, their brain is wired to just kind of be happier. And other kids, it's their brains are wired in a little bit the other direction. And again, human adults are the same exact way. So we probably have a tendency to be more positive or more negative. Now we can train ourselves more on this one, I think. We can learn how to manage all these things. So I'm going to ask for a volunteer who would like to kind of walk through these with me and kind of map out their child on this. Do I have any volunteers? And this is going to involve you unmuting yourself and talking. Do I have any volunteers that would be willing to do that?
I will.
I can do it. Oh, perfect. Go ahead.
Okay. Let's see. I can't see you.
I will turn my video on.
Perfect. Thanks, Marion.
And I apologize
Okay,
if there's cartoons in the back.
Oh, no worries. No, it's just helpful so that I know that I can see who I'm talking to. Okay, so we're going to basically go through this. Now, Marion mentioned that she has 2 kids, so this is good. So we're going to actually talk about both of her kids. Okay, so let's go with our first one, activity level. So on a 0 to 10, Marion, how would you rate your son on activity level?
I would probably say about an 8.
Okay, so pretty active. All right, and how about your daughter?
She's probably more of like a 6. My little boy, he has ADHD, so he is always like at a level 10. So
Okay. All right. Okay, cool. All right, so we're just going to see how this goes, and we're going to be kind of looking at our 2 kids and how different they are from each other. All right, so pretty high, but the son is a little higher. Okay, how about the biological rhythms, that schedule, that sort of needing to be on a set schedule with themselves in order to function well?
they both really like thrive on having a schedule. Just even this morning, we had just like a little hiccup in our schedule, and it really kind of shakes them for the whole like rest of the morning. Or
Okay.
like if I take a different way to get to a location, that messes them up. So they are very aware of their schedule.
Interesting. Okay. All right. So would you say they're like a 9 or a 10 on that one?
Yeah, I'd probably say 9.
Okay. All right. So both 9s on that one. Okay. How about sensitivity? So remember, this is the one where they like, isn't just in one example that they can hardly stand to be touched versus like, okay, you can like do almost anything to them and they're like, oh, whatever. What would
Um,
you rate them?
they
What
they're
would you rate
both like they are fine with that. They don't have like a sensitivity to any, so I'd probably say like a 5. They're probably like middle of the
them?
road
Okay.
on that.
So in the middle on that one. Okay. All right. This is interesting. So your kids are pretty similar to each other so far. So far.
So far.
Okay. Next one, intensive reaction. How about this? Do we have any drama queens or kings in your family?
So my little boy, he does struggle with emotional regulation with part of the ADHD. So any kind of it's like a 10, 11, 12
Okay. Off the
for his
chart.
intensity.
Okay.
My little girl, she can usually cope and figure it out, and like she can solve it herself. I'd probably say she's probably about a 7, but
Oh,
my little boy's probably about 10.
okay. All right. Well, so a 7 is still pretty high. I would say.
Her emotional regulation is better though. Like she knows how to
Uh-huh.
calm herself down quickly, and it's
Uh-huh.
very few and far between when she gets
Yeah.
upset.
So I guess the interesting thing is, just to think about like their instinctual thing though. It's kind of like so yes, we can manage it and we can develop skills to manage it, but it's like what is that tendency that we have that we're born with? I guess that's kind of really what we're trying to explore here. All right, so when we look at adaptability, what do you think on that one? Ability to deal with change, that maybe goes back to the structure, dealing well with that.
I would probably say my little boy again. He's probably like now on this one, would a higher score be that they are adaptable or a lower
Yeah,
score?
correct.
So I would probably say on my little boy, he's probably more of like 4 on
Okay.
adaptability, and my little girl's probably more of like an 8.
Okay, so she's very adaptable and he is less so. All right. Okay, how about approach withdrawal? So a willingness to try new things, be around new people. Um, what would you say
They're
on
they
both of
love
them?
they love people. They love being social.
Uh-huh.
They never have stranger danger, which is kind of sad.
Okay. Well, right. So we're going to talk about that in a second. Okay. So, all right. So, and I've met Marin's kids, and I can attest to that. They are very friendly.
They will
Okay,
hug anyone.
persistence. How about this one? What's their ability to stay focused? Well, not stay focused, but to stick with something for a long period of time.
Amelia could probably do that for, I'm gonna say 8, and Bennett's more of a 5.
Okay. So, okay, so daughter is better at sticking with something than son. Okay, and then distractibility. How about this one? This one is related to focus. So, high score on this is having trouble focusing, and low score is ability to focus.
I'm gonna say a 9 for my little boy and probably a 5 for my little girl.
Okay. All right. And then how about mood? What would you say on this one? So there's some tendencies to be positive versus negative, and there's sort of just their world view, their world outlook.
They're pretty positive. I would say probably
Okay.
like a 9.
Okay. All right. So they're similar on that one. Okay. So there were some differences. You have quite a bit of similarities there, which is not unexpected, right? Because there's genetic components to our temperament. So it makes sense that siblings will have similarities. And then, of course, we do have our deviations from each other, which is what makes us unique individuals. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Thank you, Marin, for that.
Absolutely.
So I guess what all of you can kind of think about this. And if you're curious, I do believe I have a tool. If you're curious to do an assessment of your child's temperament, if you're curious about it, so you can do a rating for your on each of your kids, so that you can get a better sense of this. And why is it important? So my question to you is, how do you think your child's temperament affects their behavior? Now that we've kind of talked about what these different um, aspects of temperament are. How do you think it's showing up in their behaviors? Go ahead and put that in the chat. It drives their actions, okay? Any other ideas? Well, yeah. So basically, when we think about that example, if so, like being high on approach, like so being willing to try new things. So that comes out. What does that look like in the behavior? Um, um, oh, he wants to go back to the list. Um, okay, so if like high on approach, so I'm very willing to go and talk to strangers. Okay, that could be concerning, right? So if I'm a parent, understanding that behavior that like, oh, well, my child, that means I may have to really I have to really work on teaching my child that they should be really careful when they talk to strangers. Like, who should they be talking to? What, like if somebody said, hey, let's go, I want to go show you this thing. And they're like, oh, I love seeing new things, and that's just kind of how they are. You don't want them, running off with strangers. So we have to teach them. We have to manage that. If they would never go with a stranger because they're scared of new things, then as a parent, you're going to be less worried about them doing something like that, like talking to a stranger or going with them. Yeah, so when they have low adaptability and high intensity, you might see something like they're not able to go with the flow and they majorly freak out when their schedule changes. So a lot of times these things are sort of when they're high on one thing and low on another, we see certain behaviors. So as an example, if I were low on persistence but high on distractibility, what do you think that would look like in a child? That's a squirrel, yeah. That child probably, if they're in the extremes, they're maybe with a diagnosable ADHD diagnosis, right? So when we see these things, or like look at or think about mood. So if they're very very low on mood, they have a more of a negative outlook on life. It's that tendency. Um, then they may be more likely to have an experience of anxiety or depression. Okay. So these things definitely, yeah, take forever to finish something. A documentary. Okay. Um, oh, got it. Okay. Thank you. Okay. The squirrel comes from that movie. Okay. So you need a calm environment to help your son stay calm because he's distracted easily. So when you understand these things about your child or your children and how they're each different, and that makes it tricky because they're all different, then we know what they need. We learn how to manage these things so that we can help them because they don't have those skills yet. So you will have to teach them how to manage these things. All right, let's go to our next slide. All right. So we start to see problems, behavioral problems, or sort of emotional outbursts when problems occur, or excuse me, when demands outweigh their skills. So you have these children, they don't have the ability yet to deal with these feelings that they're having. And that's when we tend to see these behavioral issues that are there, but they're based on emotional issues. Okay, so what I want to put out to you guys is it just like we don't blame a child for having a learning disability, we shouldn't think less of them or consider them to be a bad kid because they're lacking the necessary skills to deal with situations. So that's why I want parents to think about themselves as their kids' teachers. So you have to teach them how to manage themselves and their emotions. It's not going to come naturally to a lot of kids. So we don't just say, oh, well, they're just a lost cause. No, we have to work with them. We have to teach them. So let's move towards thinking about this next. All right, so I have a little activity for us to do now before we move into some of our scenarios. So let's go ahead and just click one time for me. We might have to go back to the, because we can't see the list, or we cannot see the item.
Should we going to the next one? Is there multiple?
Yeah, there are. Okay, so let's let's go with the second one there the first one that we can read. So tends to fret about all the bad things that could happen. Okay, fret about all the bad things that could happen. Can you go back to that temperament list? And what I want us to do is think about which aspects of temperament might be related to tending to fret about all the bad things that could happen. Yeah, mood. Anything else? Things that, what might cause them to fret about all the bad things that could happen? And you guys might have a child like this. It's like, well, what if this, and what if that, and what if that, and then this could happen, and what if that happens? So that's a lot of kind of how they speak. Approach withdrawal, for sure. So they kind of have anxiety about new things. Sensitivity could be for sure. Lack of adaptability, yeah. I'm uncertain about what's going on, and I don't. Yeah, okay. Let's do the next one, which I was gonna see if I could. For some reason I can't access my PowerPoint either, because I can't look at them. The next one is when they don't get their way, they give up. What do you think about that one? When they don't give their way, they give up. Which aspects of temperament might be at play there? Low persistence, absolutely. Anything else? Do you guys think of? That one might be the biggest one, but intensity could absolutely be like just a big reaction, like, nope, you're not playing the way I want, so I'm leaving, and just make a big scene about it. So definitely could be intensity. Any other thoughts on that one? He never gives up. It would be nice if he gave. Yeah, so thank you, Joseph. That's a good point. So that's another thing that, like, these aren't good or bad, right? So being persistent in some situations can be a positive thing. It's like, okay, my child is able to stick with something and they don't give up easily. But that, if you take that to an extreme, so I've seen kids do this where they're not able to do a task, but they will not give up, and they're so frustrated, and they're like getting really angry because their parent won't come help them because they can't move on until they get that thing done. So that's an example of like persistence, which we tend to think is a very positive thing, but can actually be to their detriment in certain circumstances. So that's a really good point, that we kind of like being in the middle on a lot of these is kind of what we want, because we don't want anything to be to the extreme. It's more difficult to manage. That said, we can't really change these aspects of our kids, so we have to learn how to manage them. Okay, let's look at our next one. All right, how about this one? So they hit and kick other kids frequently. What do you think this might be indicating in terms of their temperament? Okay, sensitivity. I can't deal with being touched. You touch me, I'm gonna push you. Get away from me. So high on sensitivity. Could definitely be that. Anything else you guys can think of? High activity. Yeah, that's a good one. So I just can't sit still, and I accidentally hit, and just I'm flailing around, and I'm gonna hit people, and I'm gonna, somebody gets in my way, then they're gonna get hit or kicked, and it's not on purpose. So there's definitely kids like that. That is because of their activity level. So that's a good one. Any other thoughts? Okay, approach withdrawal. So um Rachel, you may have to tell me more about what you mean on that one. Intensity of reaction, for sure. So somebody touches me, and I just, my immediate thing is like, just, like it's the end of the world that they did that, and I need to do something back. And mood, yeah, I just perceive it as negative, like this person doing something to me, and I can't deal with it, and so that's how I react. When someone takes a toy, away or steals it at school. Yeah, so intensity. Right, exactly. I just can't deal with that. That happened and I have a very strong reaction. Okay, Rachel says some kids can just be a bit more aggressive with approach. Oh, okay, gotcha. Yes. So, right, some kids come in hot and others don't. That's a good point. So some kids just are it is more of it's like an intensity of approach in a way. It's like just being more intense about how you approach people or situations. And that carries through to adulthood. I'm sure you guys have been around people like that, like, coworkers and such, or family, friends, neighbors, where they just come on real strong and they're not able to kind of read the room, so to speak, and kind of figure out what the better approach would be. Okay, thank you guys for doing that. I hope that kind of helps show how these different aspects kind of are tied together and how they really do kind of create the behaviors that we see in our kids. So yeah, we'll keep going. We'll go past this slide now. All right. All right, so I've kind of mentioned this a few times. So we can't change their temperament, but we can help them learn to manage the challenges and solve problems that are created by their natural tendencies. So that's really your goal as a parent. So let's keep going. All right, so some of the big things that I think are really important as you're kind of working through these challenges with your kids. The first one is to show empathy. Okay, so if we think about, and like, let's take off the table those situations where kids are trying to manipulate or push buttons, like they're really legitimately like, trying to do something, or they're having a legitimate emotion and they're not sure how to handle it. So the first thing is to show empathy. I see that you're having a hard time. I see that you're having a rough time with this. Um, Oh, interesting. Okay. So someone with more introverted kids tend to get more aggressive when someone encroaches on their space. That's really interesting. Yeah. So understanding that, so that's just how they are. Um, that's kind of how what their reaction looks like. All right. So we want to have empathy. We want to figure out the problem they're trying to solve, try to brainstorm possible solutions together. Let's keep going. We can go through the pros and cons of the solutions. But one of the things we don't always want to do is try, and I realize we don't always have the time as parents to do a teaching moment every single time this happens. So you have to pick your battles on this, but try not to solve everything for them. A lot of times parents just want to swoop in and we want to do everything for them. It's like, oh, you can't figure that out. Okay, let me come and do it for you. So that teaches them basically, like, if they are low on persistence and they easily give up, that's just kind of reinforcing that, like, oh, well, I don't have to do it because my mom or dad will come and do it for me. And then, or if we offer an incentive for doing it, for doing the thing, then they're not learning to, like, this is what we do because this is what we do, not because I get something for it. So these are some of the things that you can think about as you're working with your kids. Again, teaching them how to work through one of their issues, but trying to first understanding, why is this happening? Why is this going on? That's the biggest thing you need to ask yourself before you kind of get upset or angry or frustrated, is try to understand what's going on for them on their side so that you can help them kind of figure out how to manage it better in the future. Okay, keep going. All right, so we're going to break these into more steps and just kind of show you what it might look like. All right, so, and then go forward again. Okay, so as an example, here's some situations where you might want to, this is what empathy could sound like. I've noticed that it's been difficult for you to brush your teeth at night. I know it's not fun, but I'm wondering what's going on or what's up. Okay, so you're saying that what you've noticed, so you're stating the behavior that you're seeing. You're not making judgment about it or saying that they're bad or that they're in trouble or anything like that. You're just simply saying what you've been noticing. I've noticed that it's been difficult for you to do this. What's going on? Like, I get it. I don't like doing it either. The second one, I've noticed that you tend to get upset when you're asked to share your toys. I know it can be hard to share. Can you tell me what's going on? So when we ask them, we're trying to get insight into what's going on for them. Now, if they're not able to talk to you, then you're really just having to go by observation. But you want them to get used to having these kinds of conversations where they're able to identify their feelings, talk about them, and understand themselves. So basically, by doing this, you're coaching them on how to identify what's going on for themselves. Okay, let's go to the next one. All right, so what we want to do next is drill down. So again, we want to really understand the issue from their perspective. So use these reflective listening strategies. I don't quite understand. I'm confused. Can you say more about that? So that it's not just like, you're doing this wrong, or why are you doing that, or stop being ridiculous, or any of those kinds of things. Instead, we want to put it back to them. So help them, teach them how to explain it to you. That like, and then if they're not able to, put it in words themselves, you can say, is it this or is it this? You can give them some choices of like, are you feeling this way? Are you feeling this way? What do you think's going on, so that they get to have a say in it? Okay, next. And we want to ask questions with words like who, what, when, where, and be careful with why, because why can sound, if it's like, why are you doing that? Why are you being, why aren't you listening to me? We want to be careful with those kinds of things. That's not, because that doesn't sound, so be careful with the why question. You can use it, just be careful with it, so it doesn't come across like you're being, like you're shaming them. Okay, so this is the step 2B. Ask why the issue occurs under some conditions and not others. So, as an example, I've noticed that you only get upset when you're asked to share with your brother, but you seem okay to share with your friends. Do you know why? In that case, you are saying, do you know why? Okay. All right, and this is our step 2C. Okay, ask them what they are thinking while the unsolved problem is in process. If you can, if it's like happening in the moment and you can catch it, that's the best, because then you can really help them kind of get it, like what is happening like right now. It seems like you're getting upset because I asked you to share your toys with your brother. Can you tell me why it bothers you so much? So it's now you're kind of in that moment teaching them how to recognize what's going on. Okay. All right, so we want to help invite them to come up with solutions. So this is teaching them the problem solving skill. So ask them what they think could be done differently to help it make it better. So let's think about what would make you feel better about sharing with your brother. How can we make it feel more fair to you? As an example. Okay, obviously there's tons of ways to handle these situations. This is just one example just to kind of show you how this process could work. All right, and so now I have some practice scenarios. I don't know how much time we have. I know we're running out of time. But just some.
We are
Go ahead.
very short on time. We've got about 3 minutes.
Yeah. Okay, so just an example here. Jessica's getting upset because her younger brother isn't doing what she's telling him to do. If we were to help her through this, we would want to remember the steps. Empathy, drill down to understand why, and then problem solve it together. We might want to ask her why she is telling her younger brother what to do, because that's not something that a lot of times we want our older siblings to be doing unless we've asked them to do that. So we might want to question her on that one in the first place. Like, so why do you think you need to be asking him, what makes you think you should be doing that? So, okay, let's go to the next one. Another one is that your son says he doesn't want to play soccer, even though he doesn't want to go to practice, even though he loves to play. So trying to figure this out. Some things that might be going. He might have gotten bullied. He might be getting picked on, feeling left out on the team. Nobody's talking to him. The coach has been mean to him. There's lots of reasons why this might happen, instead of just kind of saying, hey, suck it up. You just need to go. You need to deal with it. Trying to understand what's going on. Okay, next. All right, and so then the last thing that I want to touch on is just that mental health disorders can be related to temperament, as we've kind of talked about already. So go to my next one. And what you want to do is look at things like, how long has something been going on? Is it happening all the time or only in certain situations? If it's happening all the time, it's more likely to be related to a mental health issue, or something that needs to be addressed outside of your child or your family. if it's something that's happening only in certain situations, there's probably like an outside trigger that's causing it. It might be a person, a situation. Think about how it's affecting you, them, and others to really get at, like, is this a big problem? Is this escalated to the point where I need help? Okay, next one. Okay, this is just some strategies to get them talking about their feelings. You can kind of see that. Can you tell me more about what's happening? How are you feeling? Things like that. I'm worried about you. Do you feel like you want to talk to someone else about how you're feeling if they don't want to talk to you? Okay, let's go to the next one. I think this is my last slide. And I really just want to end with that it's really important to not to wait to act sooner than later. So the longer your child goes without a diagnosis, the longer they're going to be without treatment. So if they really are having a bigger issue than you can deal with, I would say don't hesitate to get help. We also don't want to worry about stigma. I know that that's become less of an issue, but for some people, it's still a concern, thinking about being worried about what other people are going to think about them. But just remember their well-being is what's really most important. And then where can you get help? Basically, you have lots of community resources. In the county, you have Salt Lake County Youth Services. So that's where I'd start if I were you guys in here looking for more help. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. That was amazing. I know that we really appreciate it. And this was a hot topic. We have lots of people here and it is recorded. So we'll be able to get that out to you guys so that you can refer back to it. But thank you so much, Lisa. If anyone has any questions, I'll stay on for another hot second or two. You're welcome to throw it in the chat or unmute yourselves. Other than that, have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much, Lisa, especially for doing that while your voice is so scratchy. I'm like, you have to be dying over there now.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point, Scott. We definitely have to think about stigma for sure.
Yeah.
It seems like it's getting a little better, but we still have a ways to go. Kirsten, do you happen to know the number of participants that we had on? Like the maximum number?
Let me pull it up. I think we had, let's see. Any people on?
Okay.
So more than we had last time for sure.
Yeah.
I
Well,
know
hopefully
a lot of our participants also appreciate the recording option. They like to be able to watch it after the fact. So
Okay,
yeah.
very cool.